Hello, and welcome to the course. I'm Stephen, your host for today, and I'm speaking with Professor Lin Bian from the Department of Psychology. Before joining the university as an assistant professor, Professor Bian was the Evelyn Edwards Millman Assistant Professor at Cornell University. She received her PhD in developmental psychology at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and completed her postdoctoral training at Stanford University. Her research examines the development of social cognition with an emphasis on children's reasoning about social categories. She's here today to talk to us about her career path and how she became a University of Chicago professor. Welcome to the course. Professor Bian, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me here.
It's our pleasure. So a lot to get into, but I wanted to just start off with the basics. So can you tell us in a nutshell, what your current role is and what your, just a little bit about how you would describe your field to a layperson?
Yeah, totally. So right now I'm an assistant professor in psychology at the University of Chicago. So I study children and babies to understand how we are navigating our social world. We are trying to understand like how children think about different groups of people, such as men, women, and how they interact with different groups of people. So we are right now, like my lab is using a developmental methodology, which is just as what I mentioned. We test children from 4 to 10-year-olds, and we also work with very young babies to understand these questions.
Okay, cool. And I look forward to getting a bit more into your research. But going back first into your biography,
Mhm.
can you just tell us a little bit about, like what were you like as a kid and maybe like middle school or high school age? Was there a career path that you saw yourself taking? Were there any signs that you were going to end up doing this?
That's a great question. I don't think there were any signs for me, like to show like I will be a professor in the future,
Mhm.
because initially I was just very interested in becoming a teacher. While I was in elementary school, this was kind of inspired by my mom, by my mother. She is a teacher, so at that time I was like, oh, I just want to be a teacher in the future. But then I guess like in high school, like students were asked to share their dreams and talk about what who they want to be in the future. So I wrote something down like I wanted to be a professor, but I completely forgot about that. It's only like after my PhD years, I went back to China to visit my parents, and I saw this thing I wrote 10 or like more than 10 years ago. So yeah, that was a very interesting story, but that was kind of probably like the very first signal that maybe I will want to be a professor.
Yeah. Okay. That's really funny. So yeah, there were some signs, but it wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, can you just walk us through what your path was? I guess starting with undergrad and through to where you are today. Yeah, just where have you studied and worked and sort of how has your journey looked?
Oh yeah, of course. So I came from China, and I was born and raised in north part of China. But then I went to college in Zhejiang University, which is like a top university, but it's in the southern part of China. So during that time, I'm already like far away from my family. But then after college, well, actually during my senior year in college, I applied to grad schools in the United States, and was very lucky got accepted into some grad programs. So then after graduating from college, I came to University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign to pursue a PhD in developmental psychology. So then I received my degree, and then after that, I went to Stanford to be a postdoctoral scholar. And then, so I spent a year and a half at Stanford, and then I moved to Cornell as an assistant professor. But then after 2 years, I moved to U Chicago.
I'd be curious to hear your comparisons of the weather in those different parts of the U.S.
Yeah, so it feels like I've been to like multiple places and also across the whole country. Yeah, definitely. I mean, California has really nice weather, and Cornell and Chicago like are kind of colder, especially like the winter is quite brutal. But I
Yeah.
really love the four seasons. I just feel like you can really see like the leaves are changing and then the colors are different. So I actually really enjoy being in Chicago.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely get all 4 seasons there. That's
Yeah.
definitely a
It's
benefit.
getting pretty cold today.
Yeah, we're recording this in late September, and yeah, definitely starting to change. But okay, so going back to college though, I'm curious, like, what set you on the trajectory to grad school? Was there an experience or, sort of a decisive moment when you decided that you
Mm.
wanted to study psychology?
Yeah, so I feel like starting in high school, I became interested in psychology. So one thing is like, like in high school, especially in China, so we had like all the high school students had to participate the entrance exam, the national entrance exam, to get into college. And that is kind of like the biggest event during like the youth years. So I got very stressed out and I feel like I faced a lot of pressure. So then I started talking to like a counselor at my school. And then that got me interested in psychology. By that time, I was thinking, oh, psychology is about like being a therapist in the future. So I kind of like put that on my mind and think about maybe I'll be interested in doing like a psychology major in school. But actually, after I started my college and I was in the School of Science, so which is like where I had to study like mathematics, physics, chemistry, and also psychology was part of this curriculum, which was really nice. So I was interested in all these other subjects, but at the same time, I became more and more interested in psychology. And
Mhm.
also starting from there, I got to know that psychology is not just about you can do therapy, but if you choose like another trajectory, people will be able to do research or like what we say is like running experiments with subjects to
Mhm.
understand like how we are thinking and also to better understand our mind. So that's kind of like where I got started, and I feel like, oh, this is something I really want to study. But then I also found, during that time, I started like reading some papers and went to courses. And I found most of the literature at that time was from the United States. So there were many famous professors in the United States who are doing like super interesting psychological research. And then, so I was thinking, oh, maybe I can also try to come to the States to pursue my grad school. And that's where this idea came from.
Okay, so how did you arrive at your, focus on very young children in very early development? Yeah, what steered you in that direction?
When I was young, like I found myself enjoy babysitting my younger cousins, and I just love playing with them, and also feels like every time when I was with them, even though they are much younger than me, but I just had a lot of joy. So then in college, I had this great opportunity to join a baby lab. So it's a baby lab in psychology where they study how children and how babies learn language. And I found it fascinating. So so in that lab, they do studies with young babies to understand like how we get to learn our language from the environment. And I found it fascinating. So then I also felt like that's a really good integration of my interest in psychology and also my interest in like working with kids.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, you mentioned your undergraduate career in China, and then obviously making a big move over to the U.S. What were some of your, biggest sources of support as you did your graduate work and just, advanced it in this field? Like who or what has been of support to you?
Oh, yeah. So, well, actually, many people were being super supportive along the way. But I think the biggest supporters are like definitely my parents and also my advisors. So, my parents were very supportive even at the very beginning because I'm the only child in my family. So, when I told them like I wanted to go to a different country
Hmm.
across the globe to pursue studies, even though I know like it's hard, it's for like my parents to hear about this, but they were very supportive of this decision, and they they encouraged me to pursue that. They also try their best to visit me almost like once a year before the pandemic. And also I think because during like PhD studies, usually it's a pretty tough process. So my parents are my best listeners. When something that was frustrating came up, I always call my parents to talk with them, and they provide me with unconditional love and also continuous encouragement along the way. Yeah, so I just feel like also another like I also really appreciate my advisors in this process, because sometimes I actually it's not sometimes like for many times I tend to doubt my own abilities of pursue academia, or like doing or pursue like some or doing like a good research work in the field. But my advisors were always there to support me. So I remember like one of my advisors in grad school, she told me one thing someday that was like when I made a mistake in my analyzing my data. And then I still remember that day. So it was like when I came to her office, we were supposed to have this individual meeting to talk about like research progress. So she closed her door slightly, and then she told me, she said something like this. So what she said was, so one day you will have your own lab. And so at that time, you really need to make sure everything you report is precise and accurate. So I really want to see that day to come. And that was very encouraging, even though, I made this mistake and I feel like maybe she will blame me or something. She didn't. Instead, she put it into like an encouragement.
Yeah, that's a great example of constructive criticism. Glad you had a advisor who knew how to do it the right way. I'm curious, just because you've made this big transition from across the Pacific Ocean. Like, did obviously I'm sure that was a huge adjustment. Did you find it was a challenging adjustment in terms of the academic work also, or like how did sort of your undergraduate, I guess, experiences compare and translate into what you were doing as a grad student in America?
Yeah, so I do feel like there was some culture shock, for sure, when I started grad school in America. I think in terms of the academic materials, not so much, but it's more about it's very different culture, and I need to make like several adjustments to adapt to the new culture, and also like I mean the culture can be translated into many different aspects, such as like how people interact with each other, and also like the classroom culture, things like that. So that was a bit of a shock at the very beginning. But then I think after the first year, I got used to it.
So can you tell me a little bit about, what your sort of daily working life is like now? I mean, I know it may differ from day to day, but like, what's occupying a lot of your time now as a professor?
Yeah, great question. So I feel like when people are thinking about professors' life, they probably think they do research and teaching
Mhm.
most of their time, and that's indeed actually still like I'm still allocating much of my time to research and teaching, but also I mentor students a lot. And so right now my lab has 4 grad students and 1 postdoc. And I also have my own lab manager, and we also have about like 12 undergrads helping us with research. So then I do a lot of mentorship. And in addition to that, we also need to, for example, participate faculty meetings and to take administrative responsibilities. So those are all like different facets of this job.
So one thing we've been asking people is, what are your least favorite or, less favorite aspects of being a professor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I feel like I just feel the reason I like this job, because I always think about like I don't know if this is the right phrase to say, but there is a word like if 80% of the job if you enjoy 80% of the of all the aspects of the job, then the job is a great one.
Hmm.
So I think that's kind of similar to my experiences. So I enjoy most parts of this job. The only thing I think a little bit, kind of a little bit surprising to me when I first started this job or started my lab is I just realized there are a lot of like logistical stuff I need to consider because previously as a grad student or as a postdoc, the lab structure is already there, and I just need to learn about it and then also just adapt myself to it. But now I kind of have to create a structure on my own, which is super exciting. But then also means that along the way you will need to solve all the problems that come up. So then, yeah, that was a little bit distracting, but with time, I think it's getting better. So especially I think for new assistant professors, the first year is dealing with the logistics will take a lot of time. But then after that, once you have a stabilized lab structure, then the issues go away.
What are some of the specific challenges involved with that? Because I mean, I have spoken with a number of your colleagues who are running labs or who have been
Uh-huh.
like involved in lab work, but I hadn't thought about the fact that you have to be the person running the show. Yeah, what are some of those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great term. Yeah, we have to be the person who runs the show. So, yeah, the challenge is, like when, especially like for my lab, because we do experiments, and which is like we design studies and then we recruit participants to do our studies. And those participants, as I mentioned, are usually like parents and their children. So then first is we need to establish some relationship with the local communities and also find a way to recruit parents and
Hmm,
families to participate in the studies.
hmm,
And something that's I really appreciate is U Chicago has this resource that could be shared with all the developmental psychologists. So then I just feel very honored. And also I really appreciate the opportunity to use this database. But then after we get the database, then we have to set up schedules about like, who is supposed to test, who is supposed to recruit the participants and who is going to test these participants. And with scheduling and testing, then people need to have the skills to be able to do that. And how are we going to train them? This is like also like a related and very important question.
yeah. So, can you tell me a little bit more about what's happening in the lab right now? Like, what does the work actually look like, and what questions are you hoping to answer?
Yeah, so right now, like in general, we are interested to understand like how children think about social world. But the reason we ask this question is because there are many issues that we are facing we are facing today. For example, like one big question we really want to tackle is women's underrepresentation in STEM fields like mathematics, science, and computer science, like fields like that because
Mhm.
there are way more men than women in those domains, and then we try to understand why is that the case. So then, lots of some past work has studied like adults to understand like why women don't choose these areas or like why women face discriminations from these areas. But
Mhm.
for us, we want to understand this question from its roots. So we wanted to know like before people reach adulthood, like maybe girls are already deciding on which careers they want to pursue, or
Mhm.
maybe girls are already facing some kind of prejudice that push them away from some of the careers. So that's why we focus on young children, which compared to adults, these are very young kids, like 4 to 10-year-olds. And
Mhm.
we try to understand how they are thinking about boys and girls' abilities. And for example, like in one of the prior papers, we had we asked children, we show them like men and women, like faces of men and women, and then we ask, who do you think is really, really smart? And we found from very early on, like around the age of 6, girls begin to think their own gender is not as smart as boys. So they were
Mhm.
less likely to choose their own gender as being really smart. And then this has like a very strong negative effect on their activity choices. And in the future, it will be their career choices. So right now, my lab is really trying to figure out the mechanisms that push girls and women away from some of the areas, and also trying to figure out ways to do some interventions to help girls to persist longer in STEM.
Okay, that's really cool and really important research. I want to hear what your advice would be in general for people who are looking to maybe follow you into this field. But first, I'm curious specifically, as someone who is a woman in STEM and is studying that topic, what would your advice be for other women who are, considering going into psychology?
Yeah, so I thanks for the opportunity. So basically, I will just share some findings from our case study, and then that may help us to like link to the advice I will give.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, so basically in our case study, we had like an interesting or like a paradigm for our young children, which is we show them a novel game. And then for some of the kids, we said, this game is only for really, really smart children. If you are not smart enough, you cannot be good at this game. But for the other half of the kids, we said this game is for children who work really, really hard. So
Hmm.
if you work really hard, you can be good at this game. And what we found was really fascinating. So basically, like for boys, they show no, boys were equally interested in these two types of games. So if you ask them about like which do you want to play this game, and would you feel happy or sad while you were in this game? Boys were equally happy and they were equally interested.
Hmm.
But for girls, we found a big difference. So in the game for really smart children, girls were less interested. They were like, I don't want to play the game. It's not a game for me. But if it's the same game, but then we frame it as for hardworking children, girls were very excited about the game. So that's the kind of related to the advice I want to provide, which is, probably not an advice for women or girls. I think it's for the culture and for people out there. So I think should probably emphasize like effort and hard work as being the key for success in not only the non-STEM fields, but also in the STEM fields, because that's also the truth. Like in any careers and in any jobs, you need to work hard to be able to be successful someday. But I think right now, like some of the STEM fields, especially the ones with fewer women, such as like computer science, they place a strong emphasis on brilliance or like innate talent.
Mm.
And then that really pushes women away.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And yeah, I don't know, that makes a lot of sense. Just how, that the changing of that framing would yield such different results. So, I mean, obviously that question what we're looking into now is a big one, and I'm sure that people could spend their entire careers researching that. Are there things maybe further down the line that you hope to do, or areas that you hope to look into, types of research that you maybe haven't gotten the chance to do yet that you'd like to do? Like, what are some things that you're hopefully looking forward to in your career?
Yeah, so right now, actually, because we saw this problem, and we also, I think the also something that's more, it's actually more severe than we thought before, because we saw this like in very young kids. So then the next steps, and actually some of the current studies we are doing right now, is to try to figure out a way to make girls more motivated in STEM, as opposed to, they get the message and then they shy away from STEM. So that's a big part of the research we are doing now. And in fact, a new paper just came out today from my lab on like how we can boost the growth persistence in STEM. And we are following up on that by using like a strategy that we present role models. So we present female scientists to hopefully encourage girls to stick with them longer than previously. So that's one big focus. And another thing I'm also like interested in how children think about different racial groups, because for now, like I've been talking a lot about their ideas about gender, but then children are also sensitive to race from a young age. So do they also hold certain stereotypes about different racial groups of people? That's our question too.
Okay, yeah, very interesting and very big questions. So yeah, just to wrap up, I'll ask you a question that we have been putting to everyone towards the end of these interviews, which is, what do you find most fulfilling about what you do?
I feel like the most fulfilling part is that when you do research and then when you see the results or the data, that you are the first person like knowing the results. And nobody in the world knows about the results until, the paper is published. So I think by knowing something that's novel, that's already very fulfilling. But in addition to that, I think in my current role, I found the most fulfilling part is mentoring my students, because I get inspirations from my students on every day, and they have all these like interesting ideas, and I just enjoy, watching them to become the next generation of psychologists, and I really love that part.
Thank you, Professor Bian, for your time today. And course takers, if you enjoyed listening to today's interview, please check out the others, leave us a comment, subscribe, and follow and share this episode with your friends and family. You can find out more about the University of Chicago through uchicago.edu or the university's campus in Hong Kong through uchicago.hk. Stay tuned for more. We'll see you around.